species? Do we have certain bat species that are going to be interrupted by these machines? So there's a lot of pieces that go into making one of these projects work. But we do have the two largest wind developers in the nation looking at Kentucky for wind. Geothermal is something you won't see in Kentucky, but we can't make electricity with geothermal, but we can certainly use it to reduce our demand. Preheating and cooling air and water. We have over 200 public schools that have geothermal systems. If you're going to do anything with net zero, you're going to want to have geothermal mixed in. We can do it, we just can't run power plants on it. And so these are a couple of the different ways that we can make geothermal work. I have a couple of friends that recently invested in these systems. Long-term investment, really great tax credits for them. So people are definitely making use of it to reduce their demand. Biomass has been a really big focus for us in Kentucky. We are an agriculture state. We have quite a bit of marginal land, okay? So land that's not already in production for agriculture, it's not already forested, maybe there's a couple of cows on it, maybe it's just not worth growing soybeans or corn on. So we could use that land to grow native grasses such as switchgrass, which then could be essentially burned to produce electricity. And we're really interested in this opportunity because there are jobs to be created, especially in the rural parts of the state where we need to be creating jobs. You're going to need people planting, harvesting, processing, transporting, all within that system, working to get these particular crops into our energy system. We do have one utility, East Kentucky Power, that's testing burning of this type of material. What does it do to emissions? Does it reduce greenhouse gases? Does it reduce nitrogen and sulfides from the air? Is this something that would work in Kentucky? And we're finding that we have quite a bit of opportunity. So when it comes to meeting a significant percentage of our demand with renewables, biomass is going to play a very important role. So let's talk a little bit about how we can get into more renewables. So the University of Kentucky, there's a couple different ways. First, they can purchase and own their own renewable energy systems. So you can have geothermal systems that are working in buildings. You can have solar arrays on the roof like we have here. You make that investment, you pay that money, and that's your system. A second thing that the university can do is that they can own what's called a renewable energy or renewable electricity credit. A REC, essentially, is what we call them. And these are kind of confusing because it's basically the environmental attributes associated with a renewable energy system. So I can go out as a homeowner and buy RECs, and basically what I'm doing is I am paying or I am sending money to a renewable energy project. Maybe there's a wind farm, maybe there's a hydro farm. I can go work through a company and I can buy those RECs and I can offset, say, my carbon footprint. Maybe you've been to conferences that say this conference is carbon neutral. Well, what they've done is they've probably gone out and bought RECs or other carbon credits associated with what the carbon footprint would be of that program. And that's one way for anyone, including universities, to say, okay, we're doing more about our carbon footprint. Let's talk a little bit about money. This is a chart that shows you the levelized energy costs for renewable or for all energy sources. So basically what we've done here is you've calculated the total cost of building the system, the fuel that went into the system, operating the system, paying the people to operate the system, all the maintenance. And then we figured out how many kilowatt hours, how many units of electricity will that system produce over its lifetime, and we just divided it out. So you end up with a price per kilowatt hour or a price per megawatt hour. And this allows you to compare different systems for generating electricity. So you see what's at the top. Solar PV is really expensive compared to other forms of electricity, all the way down to energy efficiency at the bottom of the screen. There's a reason why we're so focused on energy efficiency. It's usually the cheapest, the easiest, the best for the environment way to make electricity is to not have to use it. So you can see that there's quite a range from solar all the way down to energy efficiency and how we can meet our demand for electricity. Biomass falls in the middle, wind power, hydro falls into the middle. Wind power is kind of high. There's projects in the U.S. that are generating electricity for 3 to 5 cents. I was actually with the former governor of Colorado last week, Governor Ritter. Colorado's done amazing things with clean energy in the past few years, and they've got a wind farm that's producing electricity for us around 3.5 cents. They're a great state for renewables, lots of wind, lots of sun. So quite a bit of range there, but you can see, you know, that coal, traditional coal, very bottom of the list, even scrub coal, some of our least cost electricity, and that's really the reason why we're running our state on coal as opposed to renewables.
What's the difference between new coal and traditional coal?
Well, existing traditional coal, where is the coal on the list? Well, that's carbon capture and sequestration, which is actually work that the University of Kentucky at the Center for Applied Energy Research is studying. It is not commercially viable yet, but essentially what they're talking about doing is capturing the CO2 from the combustion of coal and sequestering it, either geologically, underground, or biologically. So how much will that cost? We don't honestly know at this point. I mean, it's still something that's under development, under research, and there are no commercially viable projects in the U.S. We're basically doing pilot studies at this point. You have scrub coal. Most of the coal in Kentucky is scrubbed, or will be soon. Scrubbed meaning we're reducing the SOx and the NOx, sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides, which cause respiratory problems, health problems, cancer, things of that nature. Lots of incentives for renewables. It's been in the news lately. It's probably going to be in the news more in the future as Congress starts to pull back on spending. But renewables are subsidized. If you ask me how does that compare to fossil fuels, it depends on what your metrics are. If you're looking at total spending, we're spending more on fossil fuels and subsidies. If you're talking about a per megawatt hour basis, wind and solar are the most intensive in terms of subsidies. So each megawatt hour from wind and from solar is getting a lot of subsidy, a lot of federal subsidy. We do have state tax credits, $1,000 for residential and commercial projects, which is a very small percentage. And then our renewable energy facilities tax credit, which is new since 2008. That project in Bowling Green, the 1 megawatt project, is probably going to be the first in the state to receive those tax credits. I mentioned this earlier, but there's two different revenue streams from renewable energy project. The first one is the electricity, obviously. You're producing electricity, and that electricity can be net metered with the utility. What happens when you have a solar array that's net metered is that when you're producing electricity, your meter spins backwards. And so you have to pay the difference between how much electricity you make and how much you use. And essentially it shows up as a credit on your bill. The utility's not going to give you any money for that, but you're not going to have to pay as much. And that comes out to about 8 cents a kilowatt hour, and you're looking at a cap of around 30 kilowatts. The second piece of the equation is the renewable energy credit. When I started in this job, they were selling for around $250 to $300 a piece. Now they're down to about 40. And who do you sell them to? You can sell them essentially to utilities in Ohio. Ohio passed a law a couple years ago that said utilities have to meet a percentage of electricity demand with solar. And the way that they do that is they can either go out and invest in their own solar arrays, or they can buy these credits from people who have them on their roofs. And they can buy the credits from people in Ohio or in states surrounding Ohio. So if you try to sell your renewable electricity credit to a utility in Kentucky, they might give you like $1 for it. If you try to sell it to a utility in Ohio, you might get about $40 for it. At one point, you may have gotten around $250, $300 for it. That's the effect that policies are having on renewables in the U.S. right now. So let's talk about some math. Let's say that we're going to do a 5 kilowatt array on a commercial property, any business. We're going to assume that we're going to have to pay $7,000 a kilowatt. The system's going to cost us $35,000, and then we're going to apply the federal and state tax credits, and we're going to be in for about $23,500 for that 5 kilowatt array. Keep in mind that that would produce probably about half of the electricity I need to run my home, my residential 3